This class, we gave a very brief overview of supervised machine learning and looked at linear models and also talked briefly about other models. So in today's class, I will talk very briefly about natural language processing. Natural language is a very important capability which defines intelligence. And in order that systems can effectively communicate and help to perform tasks and make use of the enormous amount of knowledge available in a text, natural language processing is an important skill. Okay. So let me share my slides. Right, I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Now, so you have been talking, you have been studying about intelligent agents in this course. And language is a very important aspect of intelligence. It is not only a tool for communication, it is because we have language, that is why we can have complex thoughts. That is why we can express thoughts. We can learn knowledge. So the power of language is very important for having complex and abstract thought and also making sense of such thoughts. And if we look at communication, an intelligent agent has to communicate with us as well as with the users, as well as to other systems. Then there has to be a way of conveying their ideas and receiving the thoughts of others. Now, this sort of communication can be done through, APIs and, passing arguments. But if there is anything more complex, then language is the perfect tool. And natural language is a very well developed and sophisticated vehicle of communication. So natural language processing can be defined as building computational systems for analyzing and understanding human language input and or producing output in natural language. So immediate task, it not only allows communication, but also it helps in understanding of human language. For example, if you want to do text mining to retrieve information from document sources. There are three main aspects of automating language. One is analysis, which is given some input in natural language, how to get to a representation which can be stored in the computer system. The second aspect is generation, which deals with from this representation, how can language be produced? And the third aspect is dealing with acquisition, which involves obtaining the representation and algorithms from knowledge and data. Now, these are some of the important skills which can be enabled by NLP. So there are conversational agents which can interact with the world. For example, there are general purpose agents. For example, there are some agents which are task specific. You must have come across Cortana or Alexa or Google Home, which can interact with you and take your commands and help perform certain tasks. There can be also very specific conversational agents for making flight reservations, restaurant bookings, then psychological counseling, and so on. Another skill is to have computers process the enormous amount of documents which are there. You see, there is so much of written material or text type of material in written or spoken form that we cannot process them without help. So having computers which can understand language can help retrieve information that you want. That is what a search engine does. You give a query and you get a set of documents, a ranked list of documents, which are likely contain answers to your query, or it can answer questions. If you have a specific question, you want a specific answer. It can summarize. If you have a particular theme and there are multiple documents or a long document, you can summarize the gist. And you can even find new insights and intelligence by processing large amounts of text. So these are some of the few of important skills that are enabled by natural language processing. And here are a few applications. Search, as I already told. Then language translation, that is translating from one language to another. For example, Chinese to Hindi or Japanese to French. So this is language translation. So, all of us, we only know a couple of languages, a few languages, but there is so much information in other languages. If you want to get benefit, language translation is very useful. Or you want to communicate with someone who does not know our language. Then we already talked about these three. Then is sentiment analysis, where from a piece of text, suppose there's a movie review, you want to understand whether the review is positive about the movie or negative about the movie. Topic extraction, identifying the topic of a text. Identifying entities in text, named entity recognition, such as names of people, places, names of drugs, medicines, and so on. Extracting relations between entities, monitoring social media and keeping track of the different events which are being discussed. These are some of the many applications of natural language processing. And natural language processing is today useful in various domains. In fact, it can be of use in all domains, whether it is healthcare, education, agriculture, law enforcement, and so on. And each of these domains, there are specific use cases for NLP. You have any questions or comments?
Ma'am, how is it applicable in agriculture?
In agriculture, for example, there are various use cases. For example, there may be information about, so for example, agriculture, we have advisories. So a farmer may have a question about what is the right time to sow a particular crop. They must have some weather advisory, and based on the weather advisories, they have to decide the watering schedule, right? They can learn from information which is available in text about the prices of different commodities, the diseases. So there is a lot of data which is in text form and in different languages, and retrieving those data to handle their query, that is very important. It's not only for farmers, for even any other stakeholder. Actually, you see, most of the data, most of the information is not in structured tables. A lot of the information is available in local news, on spoken form. People have questions, answers, they have to process them. And for this, natural language processing is very important. Does that satisfy you?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Every domain, if you look at the domain of economics or financial domain, so if you want to predict the price of stocks or understand, there's a lot of events happening which have impact on this. So, keeping track of these events, understanding the correlations, the causations between the different events, how they affect each other, what are the different explanations. So, you see, the main thing is that a lot of information is in textual form, right? So you have to collect that, and they're in various genres. They are in people's communication, local news, social media. There's a lot of information. So and then people want to get information, and they want to express their information need in natural language, right? So in every domain today, people have realized that natural language processing has an important role to play. Education, of course, you can understand that it is extremely important to understand, to assess answers, to help teachers get the students' feedback, and so many other aspects. Now, let us look at, if you look at natural language analysis and natural language generation, so what are the different stages of trying to get information from text? Now, first of all, the textual information can come to us in written form or spoken form. Okay? So there can be a spoken form. For example, the user may interact based on speech or based on written text. And there is a layer that will come based on the type of data that you are getting. In speech form, you have to, from the speech signal, using understanding of phonetics, phonology, etc. And you have to transcribe this into textual form. You have to retrieve the equivalent textual form. In the textual form, when you write something in a particular language, it is written using certain symbols in that language. So this is dealt as orthography. And there is also a relation between, given a particular orthographic form, how it is pronounced. Okay. Then, once you get the text, then you have to do a tokenization. You have to break the text into pieces so that you can analyze the text. And in order to do that, usually tokens could be words. It could be root word, or it could be the full word, or it could be characters, etc. And the most common unit is a word. And when you want to understand the word, you have to understand the morphology of the word. Because a word can be atomic, or word can be broken up into units called morphemes. For example, if you look at the word books, B-O-O-K-S. So there is a root word book, and there is this inflection S, which signifies that it is a plural of book. Or the word books as a verb, there is this verb book, and book signifies the particular tense, number, gender, etc. for this verb. Okay. And then the form of the word. For example, if you take this word disruptively, even though it is one word, this suffixes or prefixes, they have some specific meaning. So from disruptive, by adding ly, you get this adverb disruptively. And dis has a particular meaning, dis, anti, pro. So these prefixes have certain meaning. Similarly, disrupt to disruptive, it converts a verb to an adjective. So they have a particular role. So you can identify these units of a word. And this comes from, there are two types of morphology. One is inflectional morphology, where you take a word and you have inflections or different changes which signify the grammatical role. There is also derivational morphology, which deals with how the words are constructed to give rise to new words. Maybe from an adjective to a noun, or a noun to a verb, or a verb to a noun, etc. Okay. So study of that is called morphology. At the next level, the syntactic level, you talk about, syntax is, if you look at text or a sentence is made up of a sequence of words. And this ordering of words follows the grammar or syntax of that language. So the study of this ordering is very important. So, and this can come at various levels. One is the ordering of the words in the clauses, and then in sentences. And then there is the meaning associated. The meaning of the sentence is related to the syntactic structure of the sentence. And there are meanings of different kinds. There are meanings of individual words, and there are meanings of phrases or clauses of the complete sentence. Then the meaning also has to be interpreted often in the context of pragmatics. So you have to have an understanding of the practicality of the situation, knowledge about the world, common sense understanding in order to properly interpret the meaning of a natural language sentence. And also sentences are not separate. They are often related to each other. And this, when there are relations between sentences or words in one sentence to words in other sentences, so those aspects are called discourse. For example, suppose there is a pronoun or a pronomial expression which refers to a noun phrase in a previous sentence or previous paragraph. Resolving that is an element of discourse. Okay, any questions? So this thing here shows, this shows a syntactic parse. This is the sentence, the chef cooks the soup. This shows the structure of the sentence based on decomposition of the sentence into noun phrase and verb phrase, from noun phrase to determiner and noun, verb phrase to verb and noun phrase, etc. Right? And so these are different, this type of structure is called a context-free grammar, or phrase structure grammar. And this is one way in which the syntactic structure of a sentence can be represented. The second example shows the syntactic structure based on a dependency tree. In a dependency tree, there are links between pair of words, and the links are labeled with certain grammatical relationship. For example, if you consider the sentence, I saw the man with glasses. So this is a sentence where the root of the sentence is the verb saw. I is the nominal subject connected with this verb saw. So saw is the head and I is the dependent. Okay. Now the man is a phrase, the is a determiner and man is a noun and man is the head. Right? And saw is related to man because the man is direct object of the verb saw. So the relationship is direct object. Then with glasses is a prepositional phrase, and there is a preposition relation from man, with and man. Okay. And these words, they have their part of speech. I is a personal pronoun. Saw is a verb in the past tense. The is a determiner. Man is a noun. With is an adverb. And glasses is a noun. So, understanding the part of speech of the words and the syntactic structure, that is what we deal with syntax. In semantics, we deal with meanings of individual words, but when we want to have the meaning of the sentence, we can interpret the meaning with respect to the syntactic structure of the sentence. So this is an example of semantic roles. Consider this sentence, John writes a letter with a pen. Right? So above we have a tree according to phrase structure grammar, which shows the syntactic structure of the sentence. And then below this, we have this semantic roles. So John is the agent of the action, right? So John writes a letter with a pen. Pen is an instrument of write, and letter is a patient of write. So letter undergoes, write is done on the letter. So these are certain semantic roles, and from the syntactic structure and from an understanding of the semantics of the action right, one can identify the semantic roles. So this is part of semantic understanding. Any questions? And this is just a cartoon to show, there are different meanings which can be attributed to a particular sentence. For example, this is the sentence, can you stop by my office? We need to talk. Now, so this is the professor who has told the student to stop by the office, we need to talk. And the student is thinking, what can it mean? So it could mean you are fired. It could mean, I forgot what your project is about. Can you remind me? It could mean, I have a trivial request that I'm too embarrassed to write in an email. Okay, so there are different interpretations. This is just to say that. Now, to understand what is discourse, let us look at these two sentences. This lesson explains syntactic analysis. It discusses the algorithms for this task. Now, it is a pronoun. Now, to understand this sentence, you have to find out what it means. So you have to find out that it actually refers to this lesson. Okay? So this is called entity linking or anaphora resolution. Now, this task is a pronomial expression. If you want to understand what this task refers to, you can resolve that this task refers to syntactic analysis. Okay, so this is one example of discourse relations. Any questions? Now, I talked about these three phases, these three aspects, analysis, generation, and acquisition. As I told, in analysis, you go from the language to the representation. And these are various steps in the analysis. There's the lexical aspect, where you deal with the word and the word morphology, etc. Then there's the syntactic aspect, which I explained. You want to get the structure of the sentence, and you want to understand whether the sentence belongs to the language, grammatically it belongs to the language, and what is its structure. Semantics is the meaning or the semantic role. Then you have discourse, and then you have pragmatics, which deals with practicality of how language is used. Okay? So these are the different aspects of analysis. Any questions? Any question? In generation, we go from representation to language, and that can involve various tasks. So given a representation, you have to decide, what you want to communicate. So that is called discourse planning. Once you have decided what you want to communicate, you have to plan the sentence. And for that sentence, you have to plan the actual words. So that is called lexical choice. And then ordering of the roles, how the roles are to be put in what order in the sentence. Then you have to generate the phrases and generate the words. That's called morphological synthesis.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, like in compiler design, we have this phases: lexical analysis, syntactic analysis, semantic. Is it similar to like
yes,
that?
Absolutely. It's the same thing. It's a syntactic, semantic, but
Yes.
in compiler, you are dealing with
With the
formal
high level.
languages.
Yeah.
Defined languages where the syntax is very clear, semantics is precise. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you have to do the same thing here. You can do the same thing here, but this is much harder.
Okay.
Because of the inherent complexity in language, and that it is because of the complexity that language is so powerful, right? So
Yes,
in compilers, you always, when you give a meaning, so if you give the syntax of the C programming language, or if you look at logic, so you have this first order logic, propositional logic, you give very precise syntax and semantics, right?
yes.
And then when you get the sentence, a logical sentence or a C program or a Python program, then what you can do is precisely, construct a syntactic tree based on different, different algorithms that you have, and then you have to get once you get the syntax tree, from that you get the semantics.
Yes, okay.
Then aspects need to be done here with the added difference that language is much more natural language is much more complex than formal language.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
And this is exactly what I wanted to discuss. Why is NLP hard? Why is natural language hard? The first reason is ambiguity. And there is ambiguity at all levels. Given word, even the word books, it can mean, book. It can have two different parts of speech, at least two different parts of speech. It can be a noun, it can be a verb. Given that it is a verb also, there are so many meanings. It could be that you booked someone for a crime. It could be that you booked a hotel. So there are different meanings, right? Even the noun book can have different senses. So many words have different meanings, and same word can be associated with multiple parts of speech. And for each part of speech, there may be multiple meanings. So this is lexical ambiguity. You also have syntactic ambiguity. The same sentence can be parsed in different ways. A simple example, I saw a girl with a telescope. Now there are at least two different parses. It could be that you saw using a telescope, and what you saw is a girl, or it could be you saw a girl who was carrying a telescope, right? So there are multiple, and then, in some cases, both are plausible. In some cases, multiple syntactic derivation is possible, but based on your understanding about the world, you can find out which one is more probable. For example, if you say, I ate spaghetti with meatballs, right? So with meatballs is a prepositional phrase. It can get associated to any of the noun phrase or any of the verb phrase in English, right? So when you say, I ate spaghetti with meatballs, so meatballs can associate it with it or with spaghetti. Because of your understanding about the world, you know that spaghetti is there, the meatballs is with the spaghetti in the dish. But if you say, I ate spaghetti with chopsticks, right? Then with chopsticks is not part of the dish, but with chopsticks is the instrument with which you ate. So there are multiple syntactic structures possible, but when you try to interpret them, some of them becomes more probable. And in certain cases, all of them are probable. And in many cases, based on the context, we can disambiguate. Word, we can understand what is the meaning of the word based on the context. That is called word sense disambiguation. Then a sentence can have multiple syntactic structures, and then we can find out which ones are probable based on the sentence itself and the meaning of the words, and sometimes based on the discourse. So ambiguity, is there in all forms. There is an ambiguity in syntax, in semantics, in word forms, and everything you can think of. In, reference, entity linking, everywhere there is ambiguity. And that is what makes one of the reasons why NLP is hard. The second thing is richness or variability. When you have a particular thought, you can express that thought in many different ways using many different languages, right? So if I ask you a question which doesn't have a one-word answer, if I ask you a question and there's a one paragraph answer, if all 200 of you write the answer, I will be very suspicious if I find 2 of you has given the same answer, because there are so many different ways to express the answer. Okay. Then there are so many lateral languages. We have English, Hindi, Japanese, French, Arabic. So, and the languages are diverse. There are different diversities among the languages. Even the same language, there are various dialects, right? So if you take a language like Bengali, if you look at the different regions, in India and Bangladesh and different districts where it is spoken, we will find that they have distinct dialects where the verb forms are different, the construction is sometimes different, etc. Then even in the same language, there are different genres. When you're communicating with English, based on whether you are writing an essay or writing a blog or writing an SMS or writing an email, the type of constructions and the language you use will be different, and there are different styles. Okay. And this is what makes natural language processing hard. And this is also required in order to have a very sophisticated language which serves as the way of expressing our thoughts. Now, if we look at computational systems for natural language processing, it has gone through different phases. And we can say that there are 3 generations of NLP. It is not that they are distinct, but in the first phase, of course, most of the NLP systems were handcrafted based on rules and used the knowledge engineering approach. Then in the second phase, machine learning, as in machine learning came to be applied in various fields, and in natural language processing was no exception. So from 1985 onwards, you have NLP systems which are automatic and trainable based on the data. And at this time, in the early days, there were features where with engineered features, you had machine learning systems like support vector machine or linear models or naive-based models and so on. And then in 2012 onwards, there were this era of neural network and deep learning where we come across architectures where the features themselves are learned, right? The automatic trainable neural architectures which have come to dominate. So it is not that today people do not use knowledge engineering approach or other types of approach, but this neural network-based approach is dominant. Now, let us look at the machine learning approach to language processing. So if you have a specific task, right, the task could be syntactic analysis. What is syntactic analysis? Given a natural language sentence, you want to find the syntactic structure of the sentence. Or the task could be part of speech tagging, where you are given a sentence and your objective would be assign a sequence of part of speeches to the words, to the sequence of words in the sentence. Or the task could be a simple task like text classification, where you have given a document, you want to find the topic of that document. Okay. So in all these cases, the machine learning approach works as follows. You take, in the yesterday's class, we talked about supervised learning, where we said that you can take examples of input-output pairs. So we can take examples of input and output. For example, if the task is part of speech tagging, the input is a sentence, the output is the part of speech tag of the sentence. If it is machine translation, the input is a sentence in one language, the output is the sentence in another language. Okay. If it is parsing, the input is a sentence and output is a sparse tree. So whatever be the task, for that task you give annotated, that is labeled documents. And then you use machine learning to learn a model. And the type of model will depend on the type of the task. And this model can be used on a new example in order to provide the output. So to use machine learning to the task of NLP, you require data. You may require to extract features from the data. And then you have to predict the output, learn a model to predict the output. Any questions? Any questions? Now, I said that words are usually the most important, the basic unit for working with language. So if we want to do NLP, we must have a way to represent the words, right? So the simplest way of doing it is, suppose you are given a corpus. A corpus is a collection of text documents. Now you can identify the unique words in the corpus. You can find the set of words in the corpus and they can define your vocabulary V. V is the set of unique words in the corpus. Okay. Suppose you have a particular corpus and you find that there are 50,000 unique words. Now, these 50,000 words or these V words will constitute your vocabulary or dictionary. And you can number them 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 50,000. So one of the ways of representing a word is to say that this is the ith word, this is the jth word. And this can be represented in a vectorial form as follows. You have a vector of dimension v, and for the ith word, the ith position in the vector has 1, all the other positions has vector 0. This is called the one-hot representation of words. So this is a simple representation. The main difficulty with this representation is that each word is taken independently. So if two words have similar meaning, suppose beautiful and pretty, or they are somewhat related like apple and orange in the sense that both are fruits, right? Or if you take relationship between two words like king and queen, from these vectors, these relationships are not there because these vectors treat each word independently. If one word is a synonym of the other, they are just two different words, or one word is the plural of other, they are two different words. So it cannot capture the relationship. So this is the basic representation, which is called one-hot representation, which cannot capture the relationships. Do you have any questions? Any question? Now, there were a lot of progress in NLP when people came up with, I think 2013 or 14, they came up with this dense vector representation of words. Okay? So there was this algorithm which was proposed called word2vec, which converts a word to a vector. And typically these vectors are lower dimension, for example, 100, 300, 500, and so on, not 50,000. So you represent a word as a low dimensional vector. Low dimensional means I said 100, 300 of that order. And every element in the vector can be a numerical value or a real value. Need not be 0 or 1. So that is why it is called a dense vector. And these vectors can be learned from the corpus, right? They can be learned from the corpus, and the way these vectors are learned, it is possible that similar words will have similar vectors, or certain information or meaning or relationship between these words will be captured in the vectorial representation of the words. So this is called the word2vec representation, and being able to have this representation helped us or helped scientists to make significant progress in the domain of NLP. Any questions? Now, how are these vectors learned? Now, this word2vec, there are two different paradigms. Any one of them can be used. In the Seibau paradigm, you just take some raw text and you take every position in the text, that is called a mention. And for every position in the text, you set it up as a machine learning task, where you want to predict this central word from the surrounding words. Suppose you take two words before this word and two words after this word. So given these four words, you want to predict the middle word. right? So this is a machine learning task, and you can have an algorithm which tries to reduce error on this task, so that given the vectorial representation of these 4 context words, you can find the vectorial representation of the middle word. You can set up this task and use an algorithm such as gradient descent, which we discussed, in order to learn this vectorial representation. The other alternative paradigm called skipgram, there you give the central word and you want to predict the context words of the surrounding word. Right? Again, in either of these approaches, you can come up with a vectorial representation of the word. And the philosophy behind this is the saying that you shall know a word by the company it keeps. That is, similar words have similar contexts. So if apple and banana, they are 2 different words, they're 2 different things, but the context in which you use apple, for example, eating, putting in a dessert, baking, whatever, and the context that you would use an orange, there is a lot of similarity. And therefore, maybe their vectors will capture some of these similarities. Okay. Yeah.
Ma'am, can you please explain what does each value between 0 and 1 that you had said, what does that represent? Or is that just something that the algorithm does?
So the algorithm does it. So we have this, W1 is a vector. So suppose it's a 100-dimensional vector, and there are these numbers. So each of these 100 dimensions, we do not know exactly what they represent, at least not easily, unless we do something else to interpret it. They are just 100 different dimensions. Now, this word-to-vec algorithm, when it is trained on very large corpus, maybe millions of billions of words, when it is trained on the corpus, they get certain values, so that the way, because these vectors are trained so that they capture the relationship between surrounding word and the central word. So if 2 words have similar context words in different mentions, they will have a similar vector. Okay. So we are not telling what are the features corresponding to each dimension. Right? Yesterday we talked a little bit about neural network. We said in a neural network, at every layer, maybe we did not have so much time, but in neural network, in every layer, you have certain number of nodes, right? And these nodes, they capture different aspects of the input. What exactly they capture is not immediately known to us. But given that there are 4 nodes or 10 nodes, the algorithm itself, captures diverse aspects of the input. So all that I say is that apple and orange will have some similarity in the vectors, but not exactly. If you ask me what does this 0.16 mean, what does this 0.95 mean, there is no answer. But it has been shown empirically also that these vectors, book and books, their vectors does have some relationship. And if you look at apple and apples versus book and books, if you take books vector minus book vector and apples vector minus apple vector, people have found out that these vectors are parallel. People have found out if you do distance measure or similarity measure, apple and orange vector will be much more similar than apple and book. Right? So, and let's forget about multilingual embedding. If you look at this is some of these vectors which have been projected on a 2-dimensional space. As we see that, these yellow words, LG, oven, refrigerator, microwave, GE. The blue words, kitchen, vanity, sink, bathroom, bathtub, faucet, toilet, table. These red words, finish, color, paint. green words kit, bulb, shower, navy blue words deck, concrete and grass, maroon words charger, battery, saw, dewey, Bosch, drill, tool. So you can see that semantically these words are somewhat similar. Words which are close by in this space have some similarity. And on the right side, we illustrate, the vector of China and the vector of Beijing, Russia and Moscow, Japan and Tokyo, Turkey and Ankara, etc. So a list of countries and their capitals. And if you join these vectors, you get these lines, and we find that these lines are somewhat parallel. Okay. Now, these word-to-vec embeddings are trained on a huge corpus, and they capture the relationship based on this corpus. And without going into the detail, I just thought that I will pick up this item from 2019. So Lawrence Berkeley Lab material scientists applied word embedding to 3.3 million scientific abstracts published between 1922 to 2018. So their vocabulary was 500,000 words, vector size 200 dimension. They used the Skipgram word-to-vec model. And using that, they were able to capture things like periodic table. So for the different elements, they had an embedding, and from that embedding, the relationships of the periodic table could be unearthed. And structure property relationship in materials. For example, ferromagnetic, that's a vector, minus NIFE plus IRMN. And so if you take these three vectors, first vector minus the second vector plus third vector, and if you take the vector of antiferromagnetic, they have some similarity. So they even claim to discover new thermoelectric materials. And this paper was published in Nature in 2019. So what it means is that these word representations trained on extremely large sized corpora and made available, many of these word-to-vec trained for different languages, including English and also different Indian languages. They are available on the web. And if you make use of them for your subsequent NLP tasks, you have a lot to gain. So this word-to-vec actually was a watershed in the NLP. Then the next generation of representation came in 2018 based on a type of neural network architectures called transformers. So the basic idea when we think of representation, as I told you, words have a same word has different meaning. Now, if you take the word books can be noun, word, different meanings, etc. So in a word-to-vec, the word books will have a single vector. It does not depend on what is the context of its use. So people wanted to have word representations based on its context. Or in general, if you give a sequence of words in a sentence or a part of a document, you want to come up with a representation that is in context of the context of this document. So if you look at this picture here, suppose these yellow ones are the representations of the individual words in a sentence having m words, right? And then you may start with word-to-vec embedding, and then you have multiple layers of a neural network, and finally you have the representation T1, T2, Tn, and these representations are for the different words, but they are contextual representation. Okay. So incorporating context into word embedding was a watershed area in NLP. And this is one of the famous, initial representations called BERT, which came from a group in Google based on the transformer architecture. Now, this transformer architecture, was a very influential paper by Vaswani et al. Based on self-attention. Anyway, this is not the time to discuss about it. And based on this attention architecture, this was applied in on text to get this encoding. This is called BERT. And then there were many other types of these things. An alternative architecture called GPT, based on language modeling, came from OpenAI. So GPT-2, GPT-3, they are different contextual language models. And these led to significant improvements on various NLP tasks. So these models are extremely large. They have very large number of parameters. They're trained on huge set of corpus, and they capture so much knowledge and information that, using these embeddings, people were quickly able to find that using very simple layer on top of this, or sometimes nothing, you can perform very well and beat the state of the art on a wide variety of NLP tasks. Now, I just want to mention this term called a language model. So a language model actually is a measure of, given a sequence of words, you want to find out how probable the sentence is, right? And you can use a language model to predict the next word, or if you remove the center word, to predict the center word, etc. So you must come across language models when you type SMS on your phone, or compose emails, where they try to help you in predicting the next word or phrase or sentence. And language model is also what is used when you do speech recognition. So if you look at these two sentences, I saw a bus and I saw a boss, they may be, depending on the American pronunciation of, they may have a very similar sequence of phonemes, but the first sentence is more likely than the second sentence, and language model is used to identify that. Now, these using of BERT and GPT, etc., you can look upon them as pre-trained language models. But these language models have been trained on huge corpora, running on very powerful GPUs, etc. And then you come up with these language models. So when you want to now, have your own NLP task, you can, instead of starting from scratch, you can start with these language models, and then only fine-tune these models specific to your task. And this has given rise to enormous improvement in various NLP tasks. I will not talk about multilinguality, etc. today. Actually, I will stop here now with this very brief introduction to what is language processing, what are the possible use cases of language processing, and so on. Any questions? Any questions or comments? Okay, if you have no further question, I will stop.